This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted, or welcome back, because this is part 2 of our series with Geotab CEO Neil Cawse. Neil, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, so the last episode we ended talking about Geotab's customer focus, keeping the customer needs in focus. And way back, I want to say April is the last time you and I connected during a Geotab virtual media event, which was great. We talked about Geotab's extendable service, this ability that lets you share data securely, gives the power to the customer, makes it effective for anyone that they need to give visibility into their operations. How is that product and platform evolving, and how are you working with customers to put that into operation?
Yeah, so let me maybe frame it. I mean, look, we all know that the future belongs to data, right? That we know that the knowledge of how transportation happens, how my fleets are moving, what's going where, will allow me to make better decisions, will allow companies to invent new ways of servicing new opportunities. And so one of the key things is control over that data, people's privacy. Where does my data go? Who owns it? Who can see my data? And that's really the birth of extendable services. The idea being that I have a stream of data that I generate driving around in my vehicle, and I want to be able to control who has access to what parts of that data and when. And so some examples would be, insurance companies. Maybe I want to be able to give the insurance company some limited access to how many miles I'm driving, when, what times of the day I'm driving, how many harsh braking incidents, but they really don't need to see all the details of, how my vehicle's performing or what customers I'm visiting. On the other hand, I'm working with my company. They can see me Monday to Friday. Maybe, on the weekend, I use the vehicle privately and they don't need to see that data. Maybe my mechanic needs to know any of the faults that are happening in the vehicle and the engine data, that's coming from it. So really the idea being that you can then control and move that data around. So we did our first release maybe 2 or 3 months ago of the software. We now have released our more modern version, so we're tweaking it. There's a whole flow now. You say, I would like to share my data with you, and then the person on the other side says, I accept that share. There's all the control. You don't realize how much admin. You want to automate all that stuff and make it kind of seamless. So I'd say it's going really, really well. We have in total, for various reasons, about 400,000 vehicles already out of the pool of 2.4 million that are sharing in data in some way, shape, or form. Now, the sharing is pretty basic at the moment in the sense that I'm probably just mirroring the data. I'm giving you a copy of the data. But we've got some interesting pilots that are happening, for example, at the ports, where, if you give authority through the sharing mechanism to say, okay, Jason's truck, when he drives in there, you will allow the data to be shared with the port authority. Then what the port will do is they'll make guarantees. They'll say, because you're sharing your position only within the port area, I will make sure I get Jason's truck. If it's in the wrong place, I can, hey, Jason, you're in the wrong spot. Get over there. I can get him loaded and unloaded within half an hour. And so they can make those kind of guarantees. So that's really a great example of where you can use the extendable services. We see lots of future in the extendable services. We think that the rights of data belong to the people that own the vehicle or who are driving the vehicle. And so we got to pull that back there so that there's clear visibility and transparency about where your data is going, to whom, and for what purpose. And I think ultimately, we'd all be comfortable donating our data for the purposes of saying, I'm going to have improved roads, or I'm going to do pothole analysis. But we may be less, certain of doing that if I knew my data was going directly to a competitor. And frankly, I think there's just not enough of that data transparency out there in the market yet.
Right. No, and here's where we go down the rabbit hole of that conversation, because I know that every time you and I get together, we end up here where we're about to go in terms of data rights, data privacy, data sharing. And I do want to zoom out a little bit. The Geotab angle is great. I know you have the customer in mind. You're giving them the power to share the data, right? But I know that there's a larger industry conversation going on right now too. OEMs, suppliers, fleets, service providers, all in this mix and all figuring out what data means to them and how, in a lot of cases they can monetize it and do that kind of that stuff, right? And that speaks to what control the fleet might have over the data they're generating with certain providers, be it OEMs, be it suppliers, be it solutions providers. Where is that conversation from right now from your view in terms of data sharing, data security? Is it something that fleets are understanding and having an active role in, or is it a passive thing for them?
You know what? I think that there isn't enough appreciation yet about the nuances of data. And this is where it gets complicated. You get some people on the one side of the spectrum going, it's my data, don't touch it. I want all my data private no matter what. And you get other folks on the other side of the spectrum, my 16-year-old son included, who go, what do I care? At the end of the day, I'm getting what I want. What does it matter about data, right? So in a sense, what we have to understand is the complexities of data are very nuanced. So the first thing to understand about data is that data is not all created equal. So where I drive, right, where I stop and what I do is my data because I'm the one who decides where to go and what to do. And that's reasonable. But the data that gets generated out of the engine, the proprietary engine information, frankly, doesn't belong to me. That belongs to the OEM, and that's their secret sauce on how they're optimizing their engines. And so the first thing we have to do is separate that in our mind and go, vehicle data does not belong to the driver or owner. Certain parts of it do and are reasonable because, where I'm driving at home and where my office is and my customers, that is my data, frankly, but other data isn't. So that's the first subtle nuance that many customers don't understand. The next point to maybe move a little bit towards the middle is we actually had a customer come to us. This is many years ago now, but it was one of the first times it ever opened up the understanding about the power of data. So it was a chemical company, and they came to us and they said, we want to make sure that our data doesn't go into your big data pool. And we said, well, we can't really do that. I mean, part of the product it's integrated in, and you get all these extra services, like we can benchmark your fleets and do some stuff. And they said, eventually we got to the heart and soul of the problem. We said, just come clean. What is the issue here? And they said, well, we use proprietary spraying patterns when we go into the agricultural fields and we spray, poisons and stuff. And frankly, if those special mechanisms got to our competitors, that would be a big problem for us. And so we got to the heart and soul of it. So we said, listen, we aggregate. We take 3 or 4 different. We will never release that information because we don't have 3 or 4 vehicles driving on that road, following that path at one time. So we had to put mitigations in there and make sure that data couldn't be used for those purposes. So I think that's really the key thing. But to your original question, I do not think that today enough people are actually taking consequence of it. Enough people realize the dangers on one hand, and some people are over on the other side. I think we just got to bring ourselves all towards the middle and go, you got to trust the company you're giving your data to, and you got to understand the benefits that you're getting for your data. I better be getting something back for my data. Otherwise, why are you taking my data? And I think that's important. What I will say is, how could somebody use publicly available data to go and find out the private life of people? And that data is data that's being sold today by the carriers. The carriers got into trouble before selling data. And so, frankly, there is an issue out there. I think there is just, in some cases, people do not understand where that data goes and who can eventually have access to that data. And even with aggregation, yes, you can aggregate responsibly like we do, and you can make 100% sure that there's no way that you can reverse engineer. But if you don't know how to aggregate it, or you just take away the identifier and you say, oh, well, it's aggregate now. Now what happens is people can reverse engineer it. They can put enough data, it's like a detective work. They put enough key little bricks together and they go, yeah, I've identified this. And that to me is just dangerous. And I think that's the side we need to watch out for as well.
Right. No, I mean, and I understand the personal side of it with the cell phones and the social media and everything too. To your point, there is a commercial side of it with business, and that's what we care about. But I think even in this conversation here, and we talk about this a lot every time we get together, but your explanation of vehicle operation data, engine data being the realm of the OEM, which is interesting because we've seen Geotab come out with a number of integrations, right? Integrating right into the onboard computer with the OEM hardware. That makes a lot of sense. On the flip side, I know there are things that Geotab can do with the Go devices that you can't do with any other device. You need the Go device to enable these kind of solutions because that's your bread and butter, right? So it's interesting to see how the nuance of the conversation even has evolved. I mean, that's illuminating. To the fleet point, what do you want to see from the fleets to get involved? Like, let's pretend, and we don't have to pretend that hard, that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I understand it's important, and I want to be able to talk about this, not just with Geotab, but in the industry at large. We have TMC coming up. how do I talk about it? What are the questions I need to be asking? How do I get involved?
So, I mean, if you are worried today about data, if you are concerned as an organization about, what I should know about data, I think the most important thing to ask is whoever your provider is, it's like, what are you going to do with my data and who is going to have access to my data? Think about this. If I'm running, I would not want my list of customers to get into my competitors' hands. It's the same process to de-identify all of my customers and do a reverse lookup and say, there's the names and lists of all the customers of my competitor. So you do have to take some heed here. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't think that there is a major right problem today. I do not at all think there's a problem. What I think is I'm kind of looking in the crystal ball down the road a little bit, and I'm saying the best thing that you can frankly do is you can just work with somebody you trust. Make sure you understand their policies around data. Make sure it's a company that intends to do good and that there isn't, a plan as part of their master plan of selling your data and making it available outside. And if you're comfortable with that, that's fine, as long as you're aware of it, right? You know what the story is. And I think that's really the biggest deal. And even just this conversation we've had now illuminates the differences between data, the complexities of all of it, why it's useful to the OEM. I mean, the powerful thing about data is data doesn't get destroyed. Like if I ask for a copy of the customer's data and I aggregate it, and I can do wonderful things. I can make the roads safer because I know where accidents are happening. I can look for dangerous intersections and potholes in the ground, and I can make engines better, and I can see fuel consumption impacts, and I can use that for the common good. So data must be shared. There must be a mechanism to get data to be shared. We just have to just know that there's some risks, and we know what the risks are. So it's really just a little bit of awareness of data, which I think will help all of your little fleet managers and big company fleet managers too really understand the nuances.
Well, and to your point, I do want to point out, I mean, you mentioned not getting competitor data, but back to your earlier point of companies being able to piece that together from other data points you might not consider. I know we've talked about location data, GPS data. I mean, you're at an address. The truck is sitting there for a couple hours. That's probably a delivery, right? Or you mentioned accidents. You definitely probably don't want your competitors to know where your trucks are having accidents. And it might not know it's this specific truck with this specific driver, but if it grabs the location data and then the data off either the device or the truck that's indicating either harsh braking or something like that, you start piecing it together. So only working with my solution provider can I enable the security and understand how to protect that visibility, because it's not a list, it's not an Excel sheet, it's not this, right? It's all these little points that come together.
And let me give you another quick example, right, of that point. And that is like we were wanting to publish truck location data, right? Because we said, 650,000 trucks in the system. Let's publish where they're parking at night, the hotspots, right? Just aggregate, right? So that you can see, oh, well, there's lots of trucks parking at the Walmart over here or there or there. And what would that do? That would help governments build better roads, offer services to the truckers. Maybe you put a hotel next door, maybe you can design the roads better, right? Very valuable. But so we sat down with our group of people. So we have lawyers, we have business people, we have, a bunch of data scientists, and we sit together and we go, but now think about it. If I tell you where all the trucks are parking at night, I also tell you where all the trailers and goods are. So if you're a thief, wow, it's bonus, right? I know exactly where all the stuff is to go and steal. So these things are complex and they're nuanced, and we just have to keep an eye on them.
No, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I do have an interview either later this week or early next with an insurance company talking about cargo theft and how this is an organized thing. I mean, fleets know it well too, but no, they know where this, they're getting their hands on the information and data somehow. So definitely, I love the point, working with people you trust. I appreciate you taking the time to work with me on our video project. It's always a blast catching up with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.